Hey everyone, it's Mr. Dutton, and these are your instructions on how to make your first platformer movement system. So that's going to include your left to right motion, jumping up and down with the gravity system, and then also what to do when your character falls off the stage, so it needs to respawn, or if you make it to the next stage and it resets to a new level. So we have a lot packed in here, and we're going to start off with just a basic bare bones new project. As you can see, I have no code to speak of in here. For sprites, I only have the one default scratch cat. And if you look in costumes, it only has the two costumes that it comes with, the standing one and the one where it's taking a step. It's important that we have both steps like this. So even if you made your own sprite, just please make sure that you have a standing costume and a walking costume. Those two things will be very important. Other than that, you don't need anything else. So let's get started by setting up the stage. I'm actually going to make the stage into a whole new sprite, so that way our scratch cat has something to interact with. So first I'll pull up this little button down at the bottom here. So you put your mouse over this and go to paint. That will allow you to make a whole new sprite with a new costume. And I'm going to keep it really, really simple. I'll just make a floor, zoom out a little bit so you can see how it'll look on the stage. I'm just going to make a floor for our sprite to stand on. As I put it in, it should show up like that. And you want to place it at 0 for the X value and 0 for the Y value. So that way it lines up on your actual screen exactly how it is in here where you're drawing the costume. I actually want to move it down a little bit myself. I like it being pretty low, so we have a lot of space to play around. All right, so we have our level, and before we actually get started writing our code, I want to put in a background just to make it a little bit prettier. Anything that shows up in the background that you don't want your character interacting with, you can make as a backdrop. I'm going to make it in this paint feature here, and I'll just do the same thing I did for the floor. Put a big rectangle, and instead of the default purple this time, I want to make it look like a sky. So I can change the color here. I like the gradient tool, but you can make it whatever you want since this isn't something you'll be interacting with. I'm going to put that there, make this color full white. And so it kind of looks like it has some blue sky, maybe a splash of cloud, and there's the background there. I personally like how that looks, but you can make it whatever you want. I'm also going to get rid of backdrop 1 so it doesn't accidentally go back to that. And now with our backdrop, our stage set, and our sprite ready, we can get started with our code. So first, you can click on your sprite for your cat or whatever your sprite is. And we're going to start off by making sure that it appears on the screen where you want it to when you start up your game. So to do that, anytime you're in Scratch, when you start a new game, you click the green flag for go. So everything that we start off with should be this button here under events that says when green flag clicked. It should be the first thing you see when you look under your code, even though it's not all the way at the top. It should start you off with that. If not, just scroll down to events over here. If you're at the beginning, you can go all the way down to about where events is, or just click on events on the tab on the side. It should be the first thing you see. So we place a block called when green flag clicked, and I just want it to show up. So I can go to motion, and oh, it's actually a purple one. And we just want it to be show. Now, I think this cat's a little big. We can make him a little bit smaller. So I want to set the size. So we can set size to, let's say, 80%. That's what I'm going to do. If you think that isn't the appropriate size for yours, then you can make it bigger or smaller. And we can test it out by hitting the green flag to see the size that it comes out to be. So I like that size. I think that's a good size to play around with for now. If we end up not liking that, we can change it later. All right, so next we want to set the point where it will spawn, where it'll first show up. So I'm going to go over to motion on the left over here. This is near the top. And we can hit go to X something, Y something. This will automatically fill with where your character is right now. So instead of changing these numbers directly, you can actually just move your sprite on the screen. You click and drag, and I'm going to put it right about here to start off with. on the left side of the screen, think the first level of Super Mario, and maybe like a frame off the ground, so we're not accidentally sinking into the ground when we make a gravity system. When I let go, you can see that the X and Y values update, and these are going to be the values that we put in our go to X, Y block. So you can see in here, X is -166. So for mine, I'm going to put X is -166 and Y is -86. That probably won't be exactly the spot for your screen. So take a second to pause and make sure that yours lines up where your floor is. All right, so at that point you should be done. And let's move on to the next bit. We want to now place this next block called set rotation style left, right. So first I just have to find that. Right here, we can pull it under our go to XY block and make it say left, right. This is going to be important because as our character is turning left and right, we want it to just flip from left side to right side. If you don't place this, it'll actually end up being upside down when it moves left because of the way it rotates. So definitely don't forget to put this block down. And then also underneath looks, I want to place a block that says switch costume to costume 1. There will be different points in this where the costume will be changing. So when you very first start up your level, you want it to be in the standing still costume. If you remember, the other costume is walking, so we don't want it to be at that one when we start up our game. And that's the end of our first little chunk of code here. This will set it up to appear where we want it to appear. Now we can actually start thinking about our left and right movement. So this will be a whole new block. I'm going to start off by doing the same when flag clicked. And then we want to go down to our loops. This is the first time we'll be seeing this. It's under control. It's the darker orange blocks. And we want to start off by setting up a forever loop. What that means is throughout the entire game, anything that's in here will be going. First, we can do an if. So we place this if then block inside here. Basically, that means that if something is happening, then the code will do something else. So I want to have it be a certain key pressed. So you can go under sensing and choose key space pressed. But if we're moving left or right, we want it to be our left or right arrow keys. So you can click this drop down here and make it the right arrow. So if the right arrow is pressed, then it will do something. So let's have it do a right motion. We can go back up to motion. We want it to be facing the correct direction. It is automatically, but we don't want to assume that it'll always be that way. So we want it to say point in direction 90. That's where it's facing right now. Then we also want to change X, just to find that right here, change X by a certain amount. It starts off as 10. I think that's kind of a lot. I'm going to change it down to 6. And you'll see why, but if we actually hit our test button to start it off, you can see that when I hit right, I move right, and I like that speed. If you want to make it faster, you can make the change X by button a little bit bigger, like 10 or something else. I think 10 is kind of a lot, but again, that's up to you. But we're not done because we also want to be able to move left. So we can also place another if statement. So we go back to control, grab an if, and place it right underneath. We go to sensing and get key space pressed, change space to left arrow now. And then we want it to point in the other direction. So we go back to motion, point in direction 90, but instead of that direction, we want it to be this way. So now it's -90. And then we'll also have it move, so we can go to change X by, and I want my movement to be consistent, so I'm going to make this -6 also. Whatever number you have here, you also want to have here. We can test it out, and as I'm moving, you can see I'm going to the right, and I'm going to the left. And so now we have a motion machine. But as you can see, we're not actually like walking. There's no animation for this. So in order to make this feel smooth, feel animated, we're going to have to use another set of blocks to change the costume from our standing still animation to our walking animation. So to start that off, I want to go back to events and hit when flag clicked. And you might be able to guess what's next. Under control, we'll do another forever loop to make sure that this continues on throughout the whole game. And then we can do an if or else statement. So if blank, then else. Place this inside. Make sure it goes inside and not just underneath. It should be inside the forever loop. So similar to before, we want to make sure that this is happening when our right arrow key is pressed. So we go over to key space pressed and switch over to right arrow. And now instead of actual motion, we just want it to look different. So we can go under looks and pull up next costume. This will make it continuously switch back and forth from one to the other when we're holding the right arrow key. So if we were to test it out, we can hit go and it moves very, very quickly. And that's also only in the right direction. So we also want to make it go in the left direction. So now let's go into a new if statement. So we can go back to control and we can grab another if then, place it inside the else right over here. So now instead of the right arrow, we can go back to sensing and do if left arrow. So I'll set this to left arrow. And again, we also want it to go to the next costume. So we go under looks, next costume, and it should already be facing in the correct direction because of this set of blocks we already made. So that's already taken care of. The reason I put if or else is because if we're not pressing any arrow key at all, we want it to be in costume 1. We don't want it to be in the stepping animation if we're not moving. So under the else, we want to go back to looks and then have it be switch costume to costume 1. All right, so again, take another look at this, make sure yours matches mine. And when we hit our green flag to test this out, we should be good. We should be able to move to the right. It goes very, very quickly. And it moves to the left, again, very, very, very quickly. Now that doesn't really feel natural at all, right? So I want to make it wait in between each costume switch. And this is really up to you how long you want to make it wait. But the way to do this is you go underneath the control column and you find wait 1 second. I don't like it to be 1 second. So after we place it, and we want to place it way at the bottom. So after anything happens, you want it to wait a certain amount of time. I'm going to change this 1 second to 0.1. That's the animation speed that I like the best. But if you like it a little bit slower or faster, you can make that wait time either shorter or longer, depending on what you want. So let's test it one more time, see how it goes. We'll hit go. And if I press right, it'll transition at about a normal feeling speed. I personally like this one the best. If you like it a little bit faster or a little bit slower, feel free to change that wait time as you please. And that's about it for our left to right movement. We have 3 sets of text. The one that makes it spawn, the one that makes it move left to right, and now the one that makes it change costumes as it's moving. So we are good with our left to right motion. We have a cat that can move left to right. And again, this can be used for any sprite as long as it has 2 costumes. If you don't have both costumes, obviously it's not going to change between them. So this doesn't really work unless you have both costumes available. All right. And so now we're going to move on to our next step, where we make our gravity system and we can jump up to a certain height. Again, that'll be something that you can kind of choose. So first we want to make our gravity setup. We haven't used this yet. We're going to go down to my blocks and we're going to make a new block. And we're going to keep it simple. We can just name it gravity. Before you hit OK, I want you to go down and hit run without screen refresh. That will be what we do every time we make a new block in our game. You can hit OK. And now you have a new block in here called define gravity. So I'm going to place it right next to all my other ones. I like to keep things organized left to right chronologically. You can place it however you'd like. But again, I recommend you have a good organization system so you know where you placed everything. So now it says define gravity. And we want to just place in some blocks to start making our character move down with the gravity system. So we can go under control. Or actually, I lied. We can go under variables, and we want to set a new variable that makes our cat move downwards. So we can make a variable. We click on this button here that says make variable. And I want you to write in something that indicates that it'll be moving down. I like to call it y velocity. Once you have your name, you can hit OK. And then you can set your y velocity variable anywhere in your code. You see it pops up under variables. So the first thing I want to do now is I want to just put this out there into my code. I don't have a home for it yet, so I'll just leave it right here. Next, you want to place one more block that says change my variable by 1, except instead of my variable, we want to make it y velocity. And instead of by 1, because we don't want to go upwards, we want it to be -1. So we go downwards. Basically what this is saying is that whenever gravity is activated, it will be forever changing your y velocity by -1. So for every second that passes, you're either going to be going down -1, or then after that -2, then after that -3, and so on until you hit the ground. But that's not actually what we've coded yet. So let's continue. Now we need to go back to motion, and then we want to scroll down to change y by, and we can put in, oh, I think the cut will have gotten rid of this, but underneath variables, we want our y velocity block to be inside here. All right, so we're changing y by the new y velocity. So every time it reads it, it will be going down a little bit faster until it hits the ground. Then we can go back to control and put in a new if-then statement. I'm going to drop it right here. And if we are touching the ground, we want our sprite to stop moving down. So let's go to sensing, and we can say touching, place it in here. We don't want it to be mouse pointer. We go to the drop down, we say sprite 2, because if you look, that is actually the name of our floor. So we can make that sprite 2. So if we're touching sprite 2, then we want to have our y be at 0. So our y velocity, we want that to be 0. So we can go to variables, set y velocity to 0. So we can go over here. So switch it to y velocity, I mean, to 0. That's already 0. So you can leave it. Now, one thing that happens when you do this is there will be a glitch where it just sinks through the floor. So we want to undo that and have our motion be change y by 1. So it goes upwards, canceling out that downward motion. Because right now we have it so it's always changing by -1. So we now want it to cancel out to 0, where we change y by +1. So that should even it out so it's actually at 0. But we're not totally done with this block yet. We can go back to control, and we want to actually make our jump itself. When we hit up, we want to jump upwards. So we can do an if-then statement one more time, place it inside the other if-then statement underneath our change y by 1, and then if blank, then blank. The blank we want to fill first is underneath sensing. So if we hit the up arrow key, so we put in our key pressed, change it from space to up arrow, and then we want to set our y velocity to some larger number, some big number that means we're going to be moving upwards. I'm going to set it to 15. That's a good strong number to make sure it jumps up pretty high. So we can set my variable, which we want it to be y velocity. So now it says set y velocity to, and I'm going to make that 15. We'll test this out in a moment, but first we have to actually make sure our gravity setting here is actually on, because right now all we've done is define gravity, but we haven't actually set a gravity block into motion. So the very last thing we're going to do to finish up our gravity and jumping will be to drop in a brand new when green flag clicked. And then underneath that, we want to set up the start of the game. So any movement related things we want to do. So for this, I want to set any velocity I have to 0. So y velocity needs to be at 0 when we first hit start for the game. We also want our gravity to be on. So we can go back to control. We can put a forever loop so it's always on. And then we can go down to my blocks, grab our new block that we named gravity, and just place it right inside. So if we did everything correctly, at this point, we should have a left-right movement system, a gravity system, and a jump feature. So let's hit our green flag to test, and we can move around and test this out. So we go left and right, that still works. We hit up to jump, and we go up a certain amount. You can see our y velocity variable is actually changing right in here as we go up, and we can jump around. Notice that we stop when we hit the floor, which was the reason we coded it in that way, and we are basically good. So that's our left-right movement, that's our up and down, and now that is our gravity. So I'm going to hit stop, and we can keep moving forward. So give yourself a nice pat on the back, make sure that your code looks just like this, and we'll keep moving. So now, what happens when we want to go to the next screen? Well, first we need a next screen to actually go to. So we're going to leave our code for a moment and go over to Sprite 2, which was our floor, and go back under costumes. So right now we just have our 1 costume, but we want to get another one so we can make our level 2. We're going to switch levels by having it change costumes. So we can go underneath, let's see here, right under here, under choose costume, and we're going to click paint so we can just make our own second costume. And you can make your second level look however you want. I want it to be, for mine, to just place it here. I don't want it to be that color. I want it to be our original color. So like that, get rid of the gradient. Boom. I know that's a different shade of purple. That's okay. And then we can also have a jump. So I'm going to make this kind of small, under there, and then I want somewhere for you to jump to, so I'll put it up here. So each of our levels will have slightly different color, that's fine. All right, but now we want to actually make sure it does change from costume 1 to costume 2. So let's go back to our code, and we want to be under code for our cat first, because we want our cat to be in a certain place when it triggers the game to move to the next screen. So first, let's make a new block, and I want to make a block by clicking right here, and we can name it check next level. Again, when we make a new block, we want to run without screen refresh and hit OK. So I have my new block that says define check next level. Before we actually define it, I want to make sure it actually occurs when we start the game. So I'm just going to grab this check next level block that's now appeared and put it right with our gravity block. So now let's make it actually know what check next level means. So we can go under control and put an if then statement in. So if then, drop that right there. And we want it to be that when our character goes all the way off the right side of the screen, it triggers the next level to change. So we can go underneath our green for operators. I don't think we've used this yet. So you want to find this one right over here where it is our greater than symbol. You can drop that in this spot. And we need to fill in both of these blanks. So first I'll go under motion and pick out X position. Should be near the bottom here. And so if our X position is higher than, let's say, 240, that's about where the rightmost side of the screen is. If it's higher than 240, then we want to broadcast a message to our other sprite. We can do that under events. So we need to go over here, broadcast message 1. And we need to actually make our message. So we go under here, click new message, and we can hit next level. So we're broadcasting a message named next level to every other sprite that we have, which we really only have one of them because that's all we need so far. But also we don't want our next level to change and start off all the way on the right. we want our character to be back at the beginning. So we need to make it spawn again. So we can go to X, Y, drop that right in there. And I want a good place for him to spawn. So I'm going to move my character around and put all the way at the left, as far left as I can. I think this is an appropriate spot. So we can go to X minus 220 and Y, let's say right now it's at 87. I like that. So minus 8, let's say 6, just so it has a little bit of space in between itself and the ground, just to make sure it doesn't clip through the floor on accident. All right, so if this code works, what should happen is when we test it, we can go all the way to the right and it'll switch to the next screen. So let's try that. Go right, test the jump. And then we're broadcasting next level and nothing's happening yet. So what we need to do now is go into our sprite 2 and make it actually change, because right now we're sending out the message to change, but nothing's actually changing. So if we go under sprite 2, you can see there's no code to speak of in here. So let's make some code. Under events, we can do a when green flag clicked, and then we want to set our new variable. Actually, let's make a new variable. So make a variable here. For all sprites, let's call it level, because we want it to show what level we're on. Right now it shows up in your game as level 0. So we can have it set the level to 1 when you start off. You don't want to start at level 0, you want to start at level 1. And then you want your screen to appear where you want it. So right now it's at 0, 0. You want it to stay that way. So let's go to motion, go to X, Y, and set it at 0, 0. So that way when the game starts, we start off with the floor being where the floor should be. And then we want to make sure it's on the correct costume every time. So underneath looks, we can go to switch costume to costume 1. So when green flag clicked, set the level to 1, go to X0, Y0, and switch costume to costume 1. That's our first bit. Then we can go back under events again, and we want it to receive the message that our sprite sent out when the sprite got to the right side of the screen. So let's find when I receive a message, which is right down here. When I receive the message next level, it's already filled. We can go over to looks and switch it to the next costume. And then just so we know we've upgraded our level, we can change our variable, change level by 1. So every time you get all the way to the right side of the screen, level will jump up to the next number. This should be all we need. Let's test this out now. The sprite has all the code it needs. The level has all the code it needs. So this should be good. Let's try it out. So we're moving across, get to the right side, and then it switches, and our level goes from level 1 to level 2. We can jump over this little hole here, and we're back at the beginning. So these two levels will loop over and over. So if you want it to be a full game, you can just keep on making levels so they keep stacking on top of each other. You could also make an end screen, but that'll be for another video. So as you go to the right, you'll go to a new one. And then we can test what happens when you fall off the screen. Right now, we did not tell it to do anything when we fall off. So if we fall off, we just sit at the bottom. So we don't want that, right? That's not what we're looking for. You can actually see the Y velocity still increasing, but it has nowhere to go. So we want to fix all those things. So let's do our last little bit of code for today. So that way, if we fall off, we go back to the beginning of the screen. So let's go back to our code for our scratch cat and then pick one more new block. So let's go down to the bottom, make a block. And this one I want to name check fall off screen to make sure I'm spelling right. Then we can run without screen refresh, just like the others, hit OK, and that should appear. So define check fall off screen. I will place it right over here. And then we need an if then statement. So if then, we place it right in there. And so again, this is what we did when we were testing to see where our character is and what to do when it gets there. So I'm going to go over to our operators. And the same thing we did before, except instead of it being greater than a certain number, we want it to be checking if it's less than a certain number. So we grab this guy with our less than symbol, and put it right in there. We want to be checking for our Y position, since this is an up-down situation. So our Y position needs to go in here. And our number, let's see, where is our cat right now? It is about at Y minus 204. So let's see, if we are falling off the screen, let's see if it's less than negative 202, let's say. That should be safe so it doesn't get stuck. If it's less than 202, we want it to respawn. So we can set our Y velocity to 0. So we go under variables, set Y velocity to 0, change level to Y velocity. And we want to go back to the beginning. So we go to motion and we find go to, drop it in there. And we want to be back at our spawn point. So let's see where we set our spawn to be. In this last one, it looks like it was negative 220 and negative 86. So I'm going to put that same thing right here. Minus 220, minus 86. And we have to actually make sure this code runs. So we can go back to where all of our other my blocks live and put in check fall off screen and put it with the others. Doesn't really matter the order. I'll put it at the bottom since it's our most recent. Let's test it out. So if we hit our green arrow, we start and we can move through the first screen nice and easy, and then we fall off. And as you can see, we respawn at the beginning of the screen. Try it on the other side too. Still works. All right. And so that is it. That is how you make everything you need for your motion system, left, right, jumping up, falling down, going to the next level, and falling off the screen. Before we wrap up, I have one more thing I want to add personally that I think makes it fun. And I want to set up the different heads-up displays that are in the actual game itself. So right now we have our Y velocity, which tells us how fast we're moving up and down, and our level counter. I don't know how many players want to see their Y velocity while they're playing. So I'm going to right-click on this and click hide. That variable still exists in the game. It's just not one we really care about seeing when we're playing. We do want to know what level we're on though. So I'm going to put that up at the top to make it show up. You have a few different options. Normal is this, large is this, slider is this. I don't really think slider is useful in this case. I'm going to keep it at normal. And then finally, I want to set one more variable, make one more new variable called respawn counter. This is something that will basically say, oh, you have fallen off and had to be respawned this many times. Kind of a way to track the deaths of the player as you go. So I'm going to hit OK. We have our respawn counter. And every time that the character falls off the screen, you want that number to go up by 1. So that one is actually quite simple. All we need to do is change level by 1, place it in there, and instead of level, we want it to be respawn counter. We also want to make sure that it always starts off at 0. So I'm going to go way back earlier in my code. Let's see, where exactly do we want to put it? I want to put it, let's see. Let's do it right over here, where all the rest of our new codes live. So we can set, right in here, set respawn counter to 0, right underneath our Y velocity. So now we have all of our different codes. Let's test it out real quick. And as we move, we get to our screen where we're allowed to fall. And when we fall, respawn counter goes up by 1 every time I fall. So let's test a few more falls, make sure it always works. We got 2, 3, and so on. And that is about it. This is all the code that we have for today. You see we have many, many different blocks of code. So let's see how many scripts we're running at once. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 underneath our character sprite, and then 2 more underneath our level sprite. So we have 9 different scripts running at once for all of our movement systems. This is actually pretty basic in terms of like the different kinds of code you can make. But as you kind of fix any sort of bugs that appear in your code, it'll get more complicated. So one thing that I'll recommend If you have trouble making this, or if you just want to make sure that your code is not buggy and doesn't have any issues, once you're done making this and learning how to make this and knowing where different things go and what different things you can change, you can actually go onto my Scratch page. So we're going to leave this beautiful new thing that we made. Should automatically save, so we should be fine. And I'm going to go to my page. You will have to search for my page in the original screen. But for me, I'll just click on profile. And I have a featured project here. So if you click on my featured project, I have some more advanced code that you can actually just take if you'd like by exporting the character into yours. It has a hitbox specifically made so that way we don't have our characters actual design get in the way of our jumping motion. And it fixes a few other glitches that can sometimes appear in really specific circumstances. But if you look inside, you actually see that it is very, very complex and has multiple different types of new blocks and stuff like that. There is a tutorial how to do that I found online. It's very, very detailed. It's a 27-minute video by a person who clearly knows more than me. So if you would like to take that code, feel free. And it feels a little different. I'll show you that real quick. So if we make our full screen version of the game, so as platformer example, you can export the player and hitbox sprites, then add them to your own project. I made it with a really cool looking sprite. As you can see, it's wonderful and amazing. And as you move through the different screens, I added a respawn counter to this also. There's lava here, so it makes you automatically respawn. That feature is there too. And if you fall off, it also sends you back to the beginning. It only has 3 levels. It loops like that, but you can copy any of this code if you want to by going see inside, looking through it. And if you go to my sprites here, you can actually just right click and hit export. It'll download to your computer. And then if you want to upload it to yours, you go to this button and just do upload sprite. So you can do that with the player sprite and the hitbox sprite. Export, export. Everything else is the same, like the level. If you look in here, the code is the same as what we had in the one we made today. And the thumbnail is just what shows up when you first turn on the game. So you don't need a thumbnail one, but if you want to, you can look at how I did that and make one on yours as well. So that's about it for me. If you have any questions, please let me know. You can copy this, change different things, whatever you want to do. I'll be putting the tutorials that I got some of this code from in the description of this video. Have fun. Let me know if you have any questions, and have a great day. Bye-bye.